Magic roughly serves two purposes in tabletop RPGs, either combat or utility. And the combat spells can be used for utility. If you want to use like a fireball to destroy an ice bridge, then that's cool. I'm just going to use the combat statistics of the fireball to find out if it's enough to destroy the ice bridge. Utility is different. These are things like Speak with Animal, Legend Lore, Wish, or items like the Ever-Smoking Bottle, the Portable Hole, or the Immovable Rod. They require the Dungeon Master to consider whether what you're trying to do with these items or spells right now should actually work. And sometimes they should. If the party is trying to cross a pool of lava and one of the players has slippers of spider climb and they want to take a rope, climb up the wall, over the ceiling, pop an immovable rod, tie off the rope so the rest of the party can just zip line across the pool of lava, that's cool. That should just work, no problem solved. That is one encounter solved with multiple magic items. But sometimes these utility items and spells solve the entire adventure, usually unintentionally. Take the classic stuck in a mansion with a murderer whodunit kind of adventure. In this case, if the party can cast Speak with Dead on the corpse, and the corpse just gives them the answer, who is the killer, and they can use Locate Creature to find where the killer is hiding in the mansion, that is an entire night's adventure solved with two spells. Pretty medium level spell slots, sure, but still, two spells.
Hi, I'm James. I've been a Dungeon Master for over 20 years, and on this channel I talk about the things that I think about, plan, and plot for my tabletop role-playing games. About a month ago, I had this same problem at my table. I still stand by my reasoning, but I think there was a better solution. Because I absolutely think players should be able to use these kind of magical things to solve problems. But I also think it's very easy to accidentally rob yourselves of your own fun. The fighter never got a chance to intimidate witnesses. The bard never got to play good cop. The rogue never snuck into the suspect's lair to steal information. The players probably wouldn't even realize what they missed. But I think they'll feel it. You'll hear it afterwards with phrases like, there wasn't much for us to do. Not because anyone played badly, but because the adventure disappeared like so many magic tricks. At lower levels, this kind of utility magic is more or less self-balancing because even if a wizard knows the knock spell, a third level wizard only has 2 level 2 spell slots. They can unlock the door, but that's one less whole person or acid arrow. The rogue could just pick the lock and it doesn't cost them a later ability. So how about they try that first? And if that doesn't work, maybe the barbarian could bash down the door. Only after those kind of renewable options are exhausted is a limited resource, such as a spell slot, worth it. As the players grow in levels, though, magic plays a greater role in how they solve problems because they have more of it. Higher level cantrips can replace lower level spells, and many high level adventures do away with all the monsters in a hallway that originally ate up many of the magical resources in favor of just moving to the high end combats to make sure that you're spending the time in the adventure on those high level combats and not the mooks in a hallway, which is understandable, but that leads to a situation where the players have more magic available for skipping problems. But those problems are the adventure. I want the players to have these spells and items and use them, but I don't want them to accidentally erase everybody else's fun. So we need to make sure that when a player does cast this spell or use that item, it feels like it was worth it. That way they keep using them, and that it doesn't just jump the entire adventure. My home campaign started back in the 3rd edition, and I've been playing personally since 2nd edition, and I have always hated the Dungeons & Dragons practice of retconning magic each edition. This spell exists. No, wait, it doesn't exist anymore. Wait, we're going to bring it back, but it does something completely different than it did before when it was used in the last campaign to solve the final question that they couldn't have possibly defeated this bad guy without this spell. But because it does something different, it doesn't make sense that they would have defeated that villain. They wouldn't be trapped forever beneath stone anymore. Wherever possible, my campaign will keep spells that have existed, that have been used in previous campaigns to maintain that verisimilitude. The one in question here is Discern Location. It is essentially an 8th level version of Locate Creature, and nothing short of Mind Blank or a deity's intervention will stop it. It circumvents all scrying and reveals the creature's exact name, the plane they are on, the country, the city, and the building that they are in. To use the spell, you have to have an item that belongs to the creature that you are trying to discern the location of. While I didn't know that Mana Arc Cleric had taken this spell, I did know that they have access to Wish, so I'd at least consider the possibility of these kind of solve anything spells. And I thought I had a pretty good solution by having each one of the potential NPCs, clues, locations lead to multiple different factions, plots, the different angels and the different demons and devils that they would be interacting with, so that when the players did discover something, they actually discovered multiple things. So the players would spend about 4 hours of game time investigating their leads and ultimately commit to a decision about which angel they wanted to pursue, so I could start prepping the dungeon for the next adventure. The encounter in question unfolded like this. The party is on a mission to find an archangel and convince them to help them bind Tiamat for all time by sacrificing their divine essence, dying. They've got leads on 3, and they're currently asking about the Archangel of Purity. For centuries, she's sent messages to her followers encouraging meditation leading to self-enlightenment, self-purification. Recently, those messages have become horrifying, calling for the extermination of everyone else deemed impure. Unbeknownst to the players, a demon lord has been intercepting and altering Purity's messages. They're real messages, but they're also forgeries. The party gets a hold of one of the messages, and the cleric decides to use it to cast Discern Location. The surface level adventure is finding one of the archangels, but the deeper adventure is finding out what hell is doing and picking which archangel they believe is corrupted or most expendable. So in my head, I'm thinking I could just say it doesn't work. It is perfectly plausible that an Archdevil, Archdemon, Archangel would have a permanent mind blank spell on them. They're powerful enough and have enough enemies that would be worthwhile. But that immediately feels wrong to me because the player is burning an 8th level spell slot. They should get something for that. The spell was specifically made to solve this kind of problem. So I started thinking about who owns the document. Certainly the original writer owns the document, but if someone has forged it to make it do something else, I think they also kind of have an illegal claim on it, maybe, but a claim on it nonetheless. So in a certain point of view, there are 2 owners of this document. I could just follow the player's original request and tell them that Purity owns the document, but this feels like a good opportunity to introduce the idea that the situation is more complicated than the player knows. Otherwise, they could just charge after Purity, and if they find out after the fact that there was additional information and they feel bad about it, they might feel like I railroaded them into that decision by hiding information that I didn't reveal enough for them to make an informed choice. So I delayed and had the player read me the spell again. The description says that it identifies 1 creature. Again, this document has 2 owners depending on your perspective, so the spell kind of can't fulfill its own requirements, and the spell would know that after it's cast, even if the player doesn't know that before they cast it. So maybe it shouldn't work. Again, that's going to feel like railroading the player. They might feel like the Dungeon Master is saying no, just because they don't want my 8th level I win button to work, which is not the case. I want them to get something. So maybe I should just break the DM voice and tell the player, you don't know enough now for that spell to work, so before you waste it, hold on to it. You'll get enough later that you can use this and kind of preserve that. And as a Dungeon Master, I think we should tell players if they have forgotten or missed something that would be super obvious to the character, because they are not a 17th level cleric with 8th level spells. They don't live in that world as a person. They're playing a character. My job is to cross that bridge for them and help them when they've forgotten that. But that is not the case. The character has no way of knowing that the spell wouldn't work until after they've cast the spell, and I really object to giving players information that the character has no way of knowing and identifying just because it is mechanically or story-wise inconvenient for me in the moment that the player and the character don't have information.
So I told the player, as you cast the spell, the parchment is filled with a glowing light, and you expected it to either form some sort of glowing thread leading you to your quarry, or to suddenly have the information flooded into your brain like a memory that has been lost, suddenly remembered. But instead, magic lurches. It seems torn in 2 directions, unable to complete its task. On one side, there's a kind of welcoming serenity. On the other side, there's kind of a burning, everlasting hate. And then the spell fizzles, unable to choose between these two owners.
The player wasn't angry, but I could tell they were disappointed. They expected something more, and in retrospect, I agree. In their place, I would have been thinking,
seriously, all I get are the same kind of vague answers I would get with Augury? That's a complete waste of an 8th level spell slot. We didn't learn anything.
Which, strictly speaking, isn't true. The spell had revealed some important information, and the players immediately asked why the spell had failed. They debated who the second owner could be, and asked which parts of the message had been altered, leading to the bard using some skills to try to identify where the forgeries were. The investigation moved forward because of the spell. But to Mana, the cleric, it didn't feel like the spell did what the description had promised. Even weeks later, I still agree with my original reasoning, but I think my flaw was in making the spell do less rather than allowing it to do more. If I had just given the player the information that they asked for, the cleric is asking not for this one spell to solve every question to do with this document, they're asking for something specific. Who is the owner of the document? If I had just given them that and then used that answer to hint that there are more complications than they're aware of, then I would have skipped this whole disappointing my player kind of thing and opened their eyes to there's something else out there. And then maybe the players would now have enough information to decide whether they want to stick with the original plan. Maybe they do go after purity anyway and disregard whatever's going on over there. Or maybe they decide, no, wait, if we're going to do this, maybe purity would help us if we go deal with this demon devil threat so that they don't feel like they're responsible. They can go do something else because we've alleviated their problems. Or maybe they decide it's a waste of time. Let's go after this. We care about this instead. The important part is that I want to give them enough information that they realize that this is a moment of choice to be had here so that they don't look back at later and go, oh, we missed that. If only you had thought of a way to tell us that, we would have made different choices, and feel like I robbed that opportunity from them. Looking back, I think there were better ways I could have handled this. I could have split the information. Instead of refusing to answer questions about either owner, the spell gives imperfect answers about both.
A golden light floods the parchment. You can feel the magic reaching into the universe for an answer, but it seems tugged in two different directions, each with half the magic. On one side, there is the original owner, a presence that is filled with a kind of welcoming serenity in the Mount Celestia's 6th layer. On the other side, you can feel a being of endless hate on the 80th level of abyss, in a dark, endless sea.
The advantage here is that the spell still feels useful. They immediately know that there are two owners, and the investigation could continue. The downside is that it leaves the door open for another casting. While the players may not want to or have another 8th level spell to burn immediately, if they could simply rest and cast Discern Location again tomorrow, then why wouldn't they? Maybe the adventure has a ticking clock. Another town falls tomorrow, which would have been a perfectly reasonable way to handle this. I didn't put it there. Another way would have been to commit and hint. Instead of splitting the spell's power, I could give absolute answers that the player asked for, but hint that there's something more.
A golden light infuses the parchment. You can feel it reaching in the universe for an answer, and suddenly it's tugged to the side as if by a newer owner with a weaker claim, something dark and filled with hatred. The magic is tense for a moment before it snaps back to the original owner. And you know that purity, Delilah, can be found on the 6th level of Mount Celestia in the Monastery of Enlightenment.
The player gets exactly what they asked for. Purity is the owner of the document, and the spell can no longer be used again because magic is already identified. Purity is the owner of this document. Maybe I'd allow the player an arcane check. Maybe I'd just tell them. In this case, I think I'd just tell them that if you want to cast the spell again, you need to find a new item, something that unequivocally and legitimately belongs to this second party. And then, sure, you can get more information on them because now they're on more of an adventure to go find this second object. The important part for me is that I'm not trying to say that the spell won't work, and I'm not trying to railroad them into picking a specific choice. I'm trying to make sure that they know that this is a moment of choice. I have always loved utility magic and magic's items because they made me feel clever when I found a way to use like the sovereign glue or an ever smoking bottle to solve a problem. And I never wanted them to solve the entire adventure for me. And I don't think my players do either. Players don't cast these utility spells because they want to skip the adventure. They cast them because they can't think of another way to get the answers they want, or because using magic to interact with the world is cool. When they cast Speak with Dead, we shouldn't be finding reasons that the corpse might not know an answer because it's inconvenient in the moment. We should be trying to find ways to make the answer create a new question. Good mysteries don't end with answers. They evolve because of them. When they asked, "Who killed you of the corpse?" the corpse answers, "The man in the silver mask." Spell worked perfectly. The mystery changed. They are, of course, going to ask, "Who is the man in the silver mask?"
The corpse doesn't know who that is. It would have told you the first time if it knew who the killer was. You're the adventurers. It's your job to figure out who creepy guys wearing silver masks are. Spells like Legend Lore will tell you legends, not the facts that are in the campaign notes. Spells like Locate Creature will locate the creature, but they don't have to explain why the creature is in such a weird location. If we can keep flipping the player's answer to reveal a bigger question, I think our players will continue to find these utility spells useful and continue to try creative solutions to their problem without it becoming a "I solve adventure" button. If you can reach a point where every answer you give to your players reveals a bigger question, then I think you've adjudicated this kind of utility magic well. Until next time, Dungeon Masters, remember, you're a player too. Try to have some fun.